The Mississippi was a black ribbon under the night sky. Wide, slow, ancient. Its waters smelled of mud and old bones. A river older than the country it carved through. This ancient waterway has witnessed countless chapters of human history, from indigenous settlements to steamboat commerce, from Civil War battles to modern shipping lanes. But tonight, it would witness something unprecedented, something that defied the very timeline of history itself. On the western bank, floodlights snapped on, painting the dark with harsh white beams. Armed men in tactical gear barked into radios, boots splashing through the reeds. The Department of Homeland Security had established checkpoints along key river access points following strange satellite imagery and reports from local fishermen. Something was moving on the water, something that didn't register properly on radar or sonar equipment. The agents, armed with M4 carbines and night vision goggles, established a perimeter with military precision, expecting perhaps drug smugglers or illegal immigrants. But out on the water, moving with the patience of predators, came the Longships. Not speedboats, not barges, Longships. Built from timber and iron and rage. 20 of them, low and lean, their hulls stitched together by rough hands and older memories. The vessels seemed to defy modern maritime architecture. Wooden ships with high, curved prows carved into serpentine figures, their silhouettes unmistakable to anyone who had ever studied historical texts about Norse raiders. The appearance of these vessels on the Mississippi in 2025 represented a historical impossibility, a breach in the fabric of time itself. Viking longships had never reached this far inland during their historical explorations of North America. Their Vinland settlements in Newfoundland marked the extent of their New World presence over 1,000 years ago. The notion of Norse warriors navigating the Gulf of Mexico and pushing up the Mississippi was absurd, a historical fiction that could not be reconciled with archaeological evidence. And yet, here they were. At the prow of the lead ship stood Ragnar, his axe resting against his shoulder, the wolf pelt across his back fluttering in the cool river wind. His hair was braided tight against his skull. His eyes, sharp, pale, hungry, stared at the approaching lights with the calm of a man who knew the gods were watching. Ragnar Lothbrok, or someone claiming his identity, stood as an anachronism made flesh. The historical Ragnar, if he existed at all, lived and died in the 9th century. Various Norse sagas painted him as a legendary king and warrior, father to sons who would become famous raiders in their own right. But the sagas contradicted each other, and many historians question whether Ragnar was a single historical figure or a composite character built from various Norse leaders. Behind him, his people rowed in silent rhythm, their oars slipping in and out of the water with the precision of a heartbeat. Each warrior was a living contradiction, their bodies adorned with traditional Norse tattoos and battle scars, yet their eyes held a knowing awareness that seemed out of place, as if they understood exactly when and where they were. These weren't simply raiders from the past. They moved with purpose, with strategy, with a plan that had been centuries in the making. Experts in Norse culture would have immediately noticed peculiarities about these warriors. Their armor combined elements from different historical periods, some wearing the ringmail of the Viking Age, alongside helm styles that weren't developed until centuries later. Their weapons, too, showed a strange evolution. Traditional Viking axes and swords, but forged with metallurgical techniques that seemed more advanced than 9th century technology would allow. These inconsistencies suggested something more complex than a simple temporal displacement. A storm was brewing behind the clouds. Thunder rolled low, like a distant war drum. Meteorologists had been tracking an unusual weather system moving up from the Gulf for days. The storm didn't follow natural patterns. Its lightning created electromagnetic disturbances that interfered with communications across 3 states. Some theoretical physicists later suggested that the storm's unusual properties might have been connected to whatever phenomenon brought these anachronistic warriors to the present day. On the riverbank, a voice crackled over loudspeakers. "This is a restricted area. Stand down, or we will open fire." The federal agents had established standard containment protocols, following Department of Homeland Security guidelines for unidentified watercraft in restricted waters. Their commander, Special Agent Marcus Harlow, had served 20 years with the agency, but had never encountered a situation like this. The official report he filed would later be classified at the highest levels, redacted to the point of incomprehensibility before reaching congressional oversight committees. Ragnar smiled, a slow, almost pitying thing. His expression conveyed not just confidence, but a deep historical awareness, as if he knew that firearms were no match for whatever force had brought him and his warriors across the centuries. The smile of a man who had outmaneuvered not just his enemies, but time itself. Historical accounts of Ragnar described his tactical genius, his ability to study his opponents and exploit their weaknesses. If this truly was Ragnar Lothbrok, transported through time, then he had been observing modern America, learning its vulnerabilities. He turned, facing his warriors, raising one fist. No words, just a signal. The gesture was reminiscent of Norse battle commands documented in historical texts. Simple, efficient communication systems developed for environments where voices couldn't carry over the chaos of combat. But there was something more sophisticated in this silent language, suggesting these warriors had adapted their ancient methods specifically for modern tactical situations. They answered with a roar that split the night. A roar so raw, so ancient, it didn't belong in the world of asphalt and smartphones. The war cry demonstrated remarkable acoustic properties. Later analysis of audio recordings would show frequencies specifically calibrated to create disorientation in listeners, suggesting these weren't simple barbarians, but warriors who had studied psychological warfare techniques. The floodlights flickered as the first arrows flew. These weren't crude wooden shafts, but composite weapons designed with an understanding of modern ballistics. Analysis of recovered arrows would show carbon fiber components and aerodynamic features impossible for 9th century technology, raising disturbing questions about the origin and nature of these invaders. Gunfire erupted, stuttering across the river. Bullets hit water, splintered wood, tore through the air. The federal agents followed standard engagement protocols, firing warning shots before targeting the vessels directly. Ballistic reports would later confirm that over 3,000 rounds were expended during the initial contact, an overwhelming display of modern firepower that should have decimated any approaching wooden vessels. But the Longships kept coming, moving as if they were part of the river itself. The vessels demonstrated impossible resilience. Bullets that should have splintered their wooden hulls seemed to lose velocity upon impact, as if passing through some unseen barrier. Engineers would later struggle to explain how ancient wooden ships could withstand modern ammunition, developing theories about advanced material sciences or even temporal displacement fields that somehow reduced the effectiveness of contemporary weapons. Ragnar didn't flinch. His composure under fire wasn't just bravery, but suggested prior exposure to modern weapons, as if he had studied and prepared for this specific type of engagement. Historical Vikings were renowned for their adaptability, quickly learning and incorporating new technologies and tactics from cultures they encountered. This Ragnar seemed to have elevated that tradition to an art form, preparing his warriors for warfare across time itself. He grabbed the heavy round shield strapped to his back and raised it high. The first bullets slammed into it, sparking and thudding uselessly. The shield represented another technological impossibility. Traditional Viking shields were wooden with iron bosses, incapable of stopping modern bullets. This shield incorporated materials that shouldn't have existed in the 9th century, suggesting either technological advancement beyond historical records or acquisition of modern materials before this river assault. He leapt from the prow onto the shallow bank as the ship scraped against mud. His movement demonstrated combat training beyond historical Norse techniques, a fluid combination of ancient Norse wrestling forms with modern tactical maneuvers. Military analysts would later study footage of the engagement, noting fighting styles that seemed to fuse historical combat methods with contemporary special forces techniques. Behind him, the wolves poured out, axes flashing, shields locking together. The warriors moved with the disciplined precision of a modern military unit while utilizing formations documented in historical accounts of Viking shield walls. Their tactical approach suggested extensive training specifically designed for modern combat scenarios, preparation that would have required detailed knowledge of contemporary weapons and protocols. It wasn't just an assault, it was an invasion. The scale and coordination of the attack indicated sophisticated planning beyond simple raiding. Historical Vikings were known for strategic thinking, but this operation demonstrated logistical planning that incorporated modern surveillance techniques and countermeasures against contemporary security systems. By dawn, the federal blockade would be ashes. The warriors systematically neutralized communication systems and vehicle access points, demonstrating knowledge of modern infrastructure vulnerabilities. Their approach to disabling key tactical assets showed an understanding of contemporary military doctrine that should have been impossible for ancient warriors. By noon, the towns along the river would swear loyalty to a name they hadn't heard since the world was young: Ragnar. The occupation strategy mirrored historical Viking approaches to conquered territories, establishing local governance while maintaining key strategic positions. But this model had been adapted specifically for modern population centers, suggesting extensive study of contemporary social structures and control mechanisms. The Viking king had come back, and this time he wasn't crossing oceans. He was taking the heart of America itself, one river, one town, one battle at a time. This methodical approach to conquest followed documented Norse expansion patterns, but scaled to address the complexities of modern nation-states. Historical Vikings established trade networks alongside military presence, a strategy this new invasion force seemed to be replicating with disturbing effectiveness. As news of the Mississippi invasion spread across social media and news networks, historians and military analysts struggled to make sense of the events. Initial reports were dismissed as elaborate hoaxes or mass hallucinations. Video footage showing warriors in Norse attire engaging with federal agents was attributed to sophisticated CGI or an elaborate terrorist psychological operation. The government issued statements about domestic extremists, utilizing historical imagery as cover for criminal activities. But as more evidence emerged, physical artifacts, bodies with impossible DNA profiles, vessels constructed using techniques lost for a millennium, the reality became harder to deny. Something or someone had brought Norse warriors to modern America, or perhaps created perfect replicas with implanted memories and skills. Either possibility represented a fundamental challenge to our understanding of history, physics, or human capability. Archaeological teams examining captured longships found construction methods consistent with 9th century Norse shipbuilding, but with subtle modifications that improved performance in river conditions specific to the Mississippi. Carbon dating produced wildly inconsistent results, with different components of the same ship dating to periods separated by centuries. Some materials didn't register on dating scales at all, as if they existed outside normal temporal parameters. Military intelligence agencies established task forces to determine whether foreign powers might have orchestrated this Viking attack as a cover for conventional warfare. Russian or Chinese involvement was initially suspected, but no evidence of contemporary weapons or communications technology was found among the invaders. The warriors used no radios, carried no modern identification, and spoke dialects of Old Norse that linguists confirmed contained archaic elements not found in any modern reconstructions of the language. The invasion force moved with disturbing efficiency up the Mississippi, establishing fortified positions at strategic locations. They avoided major population centers initially, focusing instead on transportation nodes and communication infrastructure. Their strategy suggested not just historical knowledge, but specific training for modern asymmetric warfare. Within days, they controlled a corridor extending from the Gulf to the confluence with the Ohio River, effectively cutting America's waterway transportation network in half. Local resistance formed quickly, but proved ineffective against the disciplined Norse warriors. Civilian militia groups that engaged the invaders reported disturbing phenomena: weapons jamming at critical moments, electronic equipment failing during engagements, and inexplicable weather conditions that seemed to favor the Viking forces. These reports fueled conspiracy theories about supernatural or extraterrestrial involvement. National Guard units mobilized across 7 states encountered similar difficulties. The warriors seemed to anticipate modern military tactics, always positioning themselves to neutralize technological advantages. Helicopter reconnaissance missions reported visual distortions above Viking-controlled territories, strange atmospheric conditions that interfered with thermal imaging and radar systems. Some aircraft returned with navigation systems permanently damaged, compasses spinning wildly even after leaving the affected areas. Intelligence agencies established communication with the invaders through intermediaries after conventional military approaches failed. The warriors, or those claiming to be warriors, delivered consistent messages. They served Ragnar Lothbrok, returned from Valhalla with the blessing of the old gods to reclaim territory once glimpsed by Norse explorers centuries before Columbus. They demanded recognition as a sovereign nation within America's borders, with control of the Mississippi River and its tributaries. Historians and religious scholars debated the theological implications. If these truly were ancient warriors returned from death, did that validate Norse religious beliefs? Representatives from various faith traditions issued statements ranging from declarations of the apocalypse to calls for scientific investigation into temporal anomalies. Indigenous leaders pointed out that their oral histories had always included warnings about the return of pale invaders from across time and space. Corporations with interests along the Mississippi scrambled to protect assets and establish relationships with the invaders. Several major agricultural conglomerates reported entering into protection agreements with local Viking commanders, exchanging resources for security guarantees. These private arrangements undermined federal efforts to maintain a unified response to the crisis. Environmental scientists monitoring the Mississippi noted unexpected changes in water quality within Viking-controlled segments. Pollution levels decreased dramatically, while native fish species previously thought endangered began appearing in unprecedented numbers. The warriors established strict protocols for river usage that seemed designed to restore ecological balance, suggesting an environmental awareness at odds with historical portrayal of Vikings as mere plunderers. As weeks passed, a strange normalization occurred in occupied territories. Communities under Viking control reported the establishment of local governance systems that combined Norse traditions with practical adaptations to modern needs. Schools remained open, but added instruction in Old Norse and traditional crafting techniques. Modern medicine continued alongside Norse healing practices, creating hybrid treatment approaches that some residents claimed produced better outcomes than conventional healthcare alone. International response ranged from calls for multinational military intervention to recognition of the New Norse territory as a sovereign entity. Several European nations with historical connections to Viking culture established diplomatic missions to Ragnar's headquarters, now established in a former riverboat casino converted to a great hall reminiscent of ancient Norse royal residences. These diplomatic overtures complicated American efforts to characterize the situation as a purely domestic security issue. The scientific community remained divided on the origin of the invaders. Theoretical physicists proposed models involving temporal rifts or parallel dimensions. Anthropologists suggested an isolated Norse community might have survived somewhere in North America, developing independently while maintaining ancient traditions. Military researchers explored the possibility of human enhancement technologies that could create warriors with the physical capabilities demonstrated by the invaders. As the first anniversary of the invasion approached, a new equilibrium began to emerge. The United States government, after numerous failed military operations, entered formal negotiations with representatives of the Mississippi Norse Confederation. International observers monitored talks aimed at establishing permanent boundaries and governance protocols for territories now effectively under Viking control. Tourism to border regions increased dramatically as people from around the world came to witness what many called history rewriting itself. The Mississippi River, which had seen countless transformations throughout American history, now hosted longships alongside barges and pleasure craft. The ancient waters that had carried Native American canoes, European explorers, Civil War gunboats, and modern commerce now reflected the impossible image of Norse sails silhouetted against the St. Louis Arch. Whatever force had brought Ragnar and his warriors across time, whether science, magic, divine intervention, or some technology beyond current understanding, had permanently altered the American landscape and challenged every assumption about the fixed nature of history. And on the banks of that ancient river, Ragnar stood each evening as the sun set, his eyes on the horizon, perhaps seeing not just the America of today, but the one that would emerge from this impossible convergence of past and present, a new world being born from the collision of timelines that were never meant to meet.